All right, so I'm presenting this paper called Unforgiven and the Fallen, and I'm challenging shame as a social identity through the Risen and the Black Sheep effect. So this is coming to the lore of the Dark Angels via social identity theory and the work of Tajfel and Turner. And so you know when the primary referent of forgiveness in the Warhammer universe is one of the murderous lightning claws wielded by the psychopathic Conrad Kurz, the Primarch of the terror-based Night Lords Legion, that the concept doesn't figure particularly highly in the priorities of the Imperium. Now, that shouldn't come as much of a surprise, given that in the 40k timeframe, one of the repeated refrains is burn the heretic, kill the mutant, and purge the unclean. However, despite the lack of almost 40 years of forgiveness in the lore, the most recent lore iterations and codex releases, forgiveness has been introduced to the setting in the return of the First Legion Primarch, Lionel Johnson. Given the second founding successors of the Legio Dark Angels, collectively known as the Unforgiven due to the events of the Horus Heresy, which we'll explore, the reintroduction of the Dark Angels Primarch presents a strong narrative challenge, not only to the setting, but to the narrated identity of the Unforgiven chapters, which is what I wanted to focus on today. We'll start with the Unforgiven themselves, and then look at social identity theory and the Black Sheep effect and shame-based identity structures, and then turn to the return of the Lion, and finally consider how embodied fiction can function as a mirror for real-world group identities. Right, so let's head into the Dark Angels and the Unforgiven. The origin of the Dark Angels is that they were the first Legion of Space Marines. That is, that they were the first ones to be set up, led by their Primarch Lionel Johnson after his finding on Caliban. And at the end of the Horus Heresy, a significant schism occurred within the Legion when Luther, who was one of the Lion's closest allies, turned to chaos. The ensuing conflict caused the breaking of Caliban. Caliban literally broke into pieces and scattered many of the traitorous Dark Angels across space and time as the so-called Fallen Angels, or in short, the Fallen. Now, it'd be really interesting here to explore the T'Chulcha and the nature of that scattering as their own work, but alas, we only have 20 minutes. But in the aftermath, the Dark Angels and their successors swore themselves to secrecy. They feared that if the truth of their betrayal became known, the Imperium would declare them excommunicate traitoris, which is a valid fear, given that the Instructum Absolutio records Cardinal Chrysostom's words. A heretic may see the truth and seek redemption. He may be forgiven his past, and it will be absolved in death. A traitor can never be forgiven. A traitor will never find peace in this world or the next. There is nothing as wretched or as hated in all the world as a traitor. Thus, the already stoic First Legion became entirely insular. They redefined themselves as the Unforgiven and defined themselves by a perpetual hunt for the fallen. Their shame at Luther's betrayal of the Lion and the Imperium became a central marker of their group identity, shaping their rituals, their secrecy, and interactions with allies, even to the point of leaving a committed conflict to chase after the rumor of a fallen present in that location. To the outsiders, they projected absolute loyalty, but internally they maintained an obsessive commitment to erasing their perceived dishonor within the Imperium. So how do we analyze this? Well, to analyze it, I'm going to draw on social identity theory, particularly Tajfel and Turner's notion that individuals don't just belong to groups, but derive self-esteem from group membership. And in that, they seek positive distinctiveness. This was most easily seen in the minimal group experiments conducted at the inception of social identity theory in the early 70s, where participants were allocated to one of two groups, ostensibly on the basis of their preference in modernist art, i.e. Klee or Kandinsky. There was no Blanche involved here. But there they found simply that the knowledge of being part of a group led the participants to not only discriminate against other groups, but also make choices which even put their own group worse off if it meant maximum differentiation from the other group. This, they theorize, was mostly expressed by the holding of positive group norms that distinguish them from outsiders. And indeed, this emphasis on positive differentiation is key for our analysis, especially given that the alternatives on offer for social categories which are presented with porous boundaries or transmutable group norms. As Tatchell and Turner posit, when social identity is unsatisfactory, individuals will strive either to leave their existing group or to join some more positively distinct group and or make their existing group more positively distinct. And indeed, we see this with the Dark Angels. For some groups, though, like the Unforgiven, their identity is rooted in that negative norm, in a norm based in shame, and the need for atonement. But the Space Marines of the Unforgiven cannot simply leave their chapter. After all, it's their literal reason for being. They instead would themselves become one of the fallen. Rather, they turn inward and they seek atonement. And this indeed actually has significant real-world analogues. Groups marked by collective shame, such as nations confronting historical atrocities, often oscillate between denial, reparative action, and or intensified policing of group norms. Dressler and Hawke and Liu found that, quote, shamed people may make amends by acknowledging their wrongdoing, and this is driven by concerns over collective self-esteem. And this also shapes the identity of the group. For as another study by Choi and others found, that groups prioritize pride in collective memories, not only which build up their group, but also respond to or serve as counterpoints for shameful events in their own history. And I quote from Choi, quote, American participants generated slavery as an ashamed event, and the abolition of slavery as a proud event in contrast. Similarly, German participants nominated the post-war division of Germany as an ashamed event and the Holocaust, and the fall of the Berlin Wall and German reunification as a proud event. This suggests that sometimes there may be pride in the present due to how a shameful situation was overcome by a group in the past. Shame therefore becomes both a glue and a fault line. Those black pearls that the interrogator chaplains receive as a mark of the unrepentant fallen, the repentant fallen, reinforce their own identity as the unforgiven. However, this dynamic intersects with what is also known as the black sheep effect. Because some members of a group may choose to deny or minimize the effects of shameful events, or indeed question the wrongdoing altogether. These varieties of responses often lead to intramural group challenges over social category norms, and often to group schism. As Fabio Sani and others have found, quote, the first step towards a group schism is the belief that the group identity has been subverted. The belief prompts negative emotions, dejection, agitation, etc., and it decreases both group identification and perceived group entitativity, that feeling of being part of the group. Finally, low group identification and high negative emotions increase schismatic attention. But choosing to leave a social group is not the only avenue for schism. Indeed, as Shimada and Lickle propose, the degree of shame and guilt over group wrongdoing is related to another avenue, the black sheep effect. The black sheep effect describes the ostracism and exclusion meted out to group members who do not conform to group norms, or worse, who actually transgress those norms. For those who find themselves identified as black sheep, they are often ostracized and treated more harshly than even out-group members in strident conflict. This strength of social category ostracism is further related to the degree of group entitativity which the social category prioritizes. For the Unforgiven, this is embodied in their treatment of the fallen. Captured fallen are tortured, executed, and forced into coerced repentance. The fallen represent the ultimate black sheep, reminders of the betrayal and sources of ongoing shame, and therefore they increase the group entitativity that the social category proposes. So what happens with the return of the lion? Well, the recent law has disrupted this paradigm of the Unforgiven. In The Lion, Son of the Forest, Lionel Johnson returns after 10,000 years of slumber and of healing deep inside the rock. During his mysterious forest walks, when he comes out into the 40k universe, he encounters some of the fallen, many of whom insist that they were deceived rather than being actively traitorous. Instead of condemning them, as the Unforgiven would have done, Johnson offers conditional forgiveness. These warriors become collectively known as the Risen. And I quote from Lion Son of the Forest: "If you, the lion, are not who we thought you were, then we were fools," says Afkar of Fallen, his voice stroked up. "Fools who fired on their own battle brothers for no reason." "Say not for no reason," the lion says. He tries to keep his tone neutral, for condescension would be as counterproductive as anger. "Say that you were deceived, as was I, and that now you have the opportunity to atone for whatever mistakes you feel you made, beside me, instead of from the shadows." This is remarkable for two reasons. Firstly, it reframes the identity of the fallen. They are no longer necessarily irredeemable black sheep, but potential members of a renewed in-group, the renewed First Legion. Secondly, it introduces the theme of forgiveness into a universe otherwise characterized by nihilism, where redemption usually comes only through death. However, throughout, the lion hints that the forgiveness on offer is not unlimited, and while it stems from his own magnanimity, it is predicated upon the behavior and attitude of the recipient. Quote from later on in the same novel: "Seraphax, another fallen, however, is not lost. He has chosen his path, and it leads to a damnation of the soul from which there is no return. The lion is as certain of that as he is of anything, for all that he is a practical being grounded in the material universe. Whatever is left of the warrior that was Lionel Johnson's gene son is now twisted almost beyond recognition, either a slave to the powers of chaos or willingly doing their work." End quote. From a lore perspective, Seraphax is a heretic and deserves only death, for he is a threat to humanity, and, quote, "the lion has always eliminated such threats." And so the lion's reintroduction into the universe challenges that nature of the Unforgiven. And here, the lion's actions continue to destabilize the Unforgiven's identity. If some of the fallen can be actually forgiven, then the entire foundation of millennia upon millennia of secrecy and shame is called into question. This raises the possibility of schism between those willing to accept the Risen as those who continue to see, and those who continue to see them as traitors. Indeed, this is reflected in a White Dwarf info entry, where an interrogated chaplain is given pause to consider whether or not their cause is just. "What," and I quote from that from that diary entry, quote, "What then, if subject 21 was innocent of the charges I have sought his confession for? Have I been mistaken in the past? Have we, as a chapter, made such errors? I cannot believe that, for I sense a precipice in such thoughts over which I dare not step." From a social identity perspective, the spectre of rejection from the Legion hangs over the First Legion, the Unforgiven, like a Calibanite sword of Damocles over these new arrangements. Will there be schism, or will there be renewal? We see a little bit of that in the Angels of Absolution. From a theoretical standpoint, then, the Risen complicate the dynamics of a shame-based social identity. Forgiveness, which is legitimated by an authoritative figure, in this case, the Primarch Lionel Johnson, creates a pathway to reconstituting the group around positive norms. This challenges the entirety of the Unforgiven, potentially leading to renewal or further fragmentation. And indeed, we see some of that, as I've hinted at, already happening in the Angels of Absolution, who, as far back as at least the 5th edition, don't believe that they need to seek absolution for the breaking of Caliban. Rather, they still continue to hunt the fallen, but they do so because of their heretic nature, not because of any need for absolution. And indeed, beyond the fictional setting, these dynamics resonate with real-world cases of shame and forgiveness in collective identities. For example, national communities confronting histories of genocide or colonialism, or religious groups managing moral transgressions. The key point here is that these fictional avenues for exploring forgiveness and reintegration can fundamentally reshape real-world group identities, though not without resistance or the risk of schism. And it is on this final point that I want to briefly mention a piece of the meta-lore around the Dark Angels. It is well recognised that the late 19th century poet Lionel Johnson and his poem The Dark Angel would appear to be the inspiration for the Warhammer 40,000 Legion. And indeed, without the advantage of having the name and written out for you, wouldn't know that the Lion L. Johnson and Lionel Johnson are significantly different spellings. The poem The Dark Angel itself is a poignant reflection upon societal shame. In this case, in relation to Johnson's own struggle with homosexuality at the end of the with relationship to Oscar Wilde. Certainly, queer groups are one of the significant social identities who regularly report social shaming and often inhabit a social shame-based identity. However, they are certainly not the only group to experience such identity shame, with it also being commonly reported amongst members of the purity culture movement of Christian evangelicalism, and indeed amongst political parties, both in the United States and further afield. Within both of these contexts, there is a real and felt struggle for acceptance and engagement by those who feel ostracized by their position in society, in the same fashion as Lionel Johnson recorded in his poem The Dark Angel. For the world of Warhammer 40,000, it is not a far step to posit that a form of cathartic roleplay may take place as players inhabit the world that they co-create through the painting of miniatures and tabletop wargaming. Indeed, Mike Brooks, the author of The Lion, Son of the Forest, he himself identifies as homosexual and queer, an aspect which, while officially unexplored, brings further nuance to his presentation of the First Legion and of their Primarch. So, to conclude, the Unforgiven of Warhammer 40,000 serve as a rich case study for examining how shame, secrecy, and the black sheep effect shape collective identity. Their evolution within the lore, with the return of the lion and the emergence of the risen, can illustrate how forgiveness, though disruptive, can recalibrate group boundaries and norms. And indeed, we're yet to see how that will play out, probably in 11th or 12th edition. In both fictional and real-world contexts, this demonstrates a tension between maintaining cohesion through exclusion and transforming identity through reconciliation. Even in the grim darkness of the far future, the possibility of forgiveness offers a striking challenge to established narratives of hopelessness and division. Thank you.